Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our brand new JLI course, My God, Defining the Divine. Now, in my JLI classes, there are no writing assignments. So I'm not going to give you a writing assignment. I'm going to give you a mental writing assignment. Imagine that I gave you an assignment, and I said, I want you to write down everything that you know about God. His character, his nature, his personality. How many pages do you think that you could fill? Now, if I asked you to write about Pesach, right? Everything that you know about Pesach, how many pages you can fill? I would imagine you probably could get a few pages in there about Pesach. When it comes to the nature of God, most people are a little bit more limited. However, one thing that everyone is able to write down is that God is one. And this, of course, reminds me of the famous joke of the family who's doing well, they're getting successful, they want to send their child to an elite private school. However, the best private school in the area is a Catholic school. It's a Jewish family, atheist family, but if that's the best education, they send their kids to the school. Kid goes to the school, he comes home and he starts telling his parents, I learned about the Trinity, right? There are three beings within God. And the father says, wait a second, hold on a second. You should know there's only one God and we don't believe in him anyway, right? So classic joke, but it conveys a very important point, which is the centrality of the notion and the idea that God is one to a Jew. Whether you're an atheist or not, everyone knows that from a Jewish perspective, God is one. Now, why is this so important? Abraham, our patriarch, 4,000 years ago, he grew up in a society, in an era, in a culture where there was not one God, there was not 5 gods, there was not 10 gods, there were dozens of gods. For everything you could possibly imagine, there was a God. Right? However, Abraham championed a radically new understanding of a single, omnipotent, invisible, supreme being. He revolutionized the world. Everything that we know today of Judaism ultimately stems from and flows from this idea. But who or what is this God who is at the center of the Jewish understanding of everything? In this course, we are going to ask and answer 25 questions of the most fundamental and foundational ideas about God. But before we get into it, there is a question that we have to address. Why is it important to deepen our understanding of God? Now, if you look at history, you'll notice something very interesting. Historians, psychologists, they've all seen that people seem to have this craving, this desire, an interest, a pull towards some type of spirituality. Globally, universally, amongst everyone in the world, humans have a need to feel accomplished and achieved. And they look to the spiritual realm to meet this need. And they point out that not only is it a natural human need for some spirituality, but in fact, it's actually very, very healthy. And we're going to see that in text number 1. So please open your book to text number 1. Jim, would you like to start us off reading text number 1? I'm not sure if the recording will pick it up, but try as best you can, loud and clear for text number 1.
Each of us is endowed with the natural capacity to perceive a greater reality, conscientiously connect the life force that moves in, through and around us. Whether or not we participate in spiritual practice or adhere to faith tradition, whether or not we identify as religious or spiritual, our brain has a natural inclination toward the docking station for spiritual awareness. The awakened brain is a neutral circuitry that allows us to see the world more fully and thus enhance our individual, societal, and global well-being. I didn't set out to study spirituality per se. My discovery of awakened brain began with a desire to understand human resilience and help people who are struggling bit by bit. Striking data points and my patients' stories of hurt and healing helped me see that spiritual experience was a vital, though overlooked component of healing. I discussed the awakened brain is both inherent in physiologically invaluable to our health and functioning.
So Dr. Lisa Miller says something quite powerful, that the spiritual experience is a vital component of healing. That people who believe that there's a meaning in life, people who believe that there's a purpose to life, that there's a creator, right? There's a God who put us here, those people ultimately are more healthy. And she calls it the awakened brain. People who go through life with an awakened brain function on a completely different level. Now, of course, the Torah says having God play a major role in your life is huge. Now, the Jewish approach to faith is one that is not dogmatic. Because it says in the book, that's it. Jewish faith is big on asking questions, debating, discussing, answering. Why? There are other religions who are quite famous and quite well known for, do what I say, that's what it says in the book, no questions allowed, and we're not even going to give you a translation so you can look it up yourself. What does Judaism have to say? Let's go to text number 2. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidic philosophy. Eileen, we'd like to read on page number 4.
The entirety of human existence and purpose is to gain an intimate knowledge of God's glory and majestic splendor, each individual to the extent of their intellectual capacity. This goal is stated in the Zohar. God created the world in order that they may know him.
The Alter Rebbe quotes the Zohar, that understanding God to the extent possible is the very purpose of our being. What does that mean? Why did God create the world? He wants to be in a relationship with us. In order to be in a relationship with us, God has to know us, and we have to know him as well. Otherwise, we're a robot. You can't be in a relationship with a robot. So therefore, the Zohar says, and the Alter Rebbe quotes it in Tanya, the idea of knowing and understanding, questioning, asking about God, that's critical to the very purpose that the world was created and the very reason for our existence. Reb Saadia Gaon, one of the great Jewish scholars, philosophers in Jewish history, wrote a book analyzing exactly this issue. He explains why. Text number 3. Phil, would you like to read text number 3 on page 5?
We engage in philosophic and intellectual probe of the principles of our faith for 2 reasons. First, to intellectually confirm that which we already know, having been so informed by God's prophets. Second, to empower ourselves to respond to those who take issues with our beliefs.
So Reb Saadia Gaon makes 2 points. He says we do not just accept it as fact, everything that we are told by the prophets and everything that has been passed down to generation. Now, yes, we do accept it as fact, but we also seek to understand it to the level possible. Why? Because we're human beings. We're thinking people. In every capacity, in every element of life, our mind plays a major role. How could it be that when it comes to our connection to God, our relationship with God, the most critical, vital, fundamental element of ourself would not be there, would not exist? You just accept it on faith? Absolutely not, right? From a Jewish perspective, we must question, we must ask, because we need to understand. So every facet and faculty will be able to be in that deep and meaningful relationship with God. And then Reb Saadia Gaon adds that, you know what? It's also good to know what to answer a heretic as well. That also doesn't hurt to have that degree of knowledge as well. So in this course, 25 questions, 25 answers. Tonight, 4 questions. We are going to ask, what is God? Where is God? How did God come to be? And is God a he, a she, or a they? We'll begin with question number one. We're saving the best for last. What is God? It's a great story about the Hasidic Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, that he was debating a Jew in his community who was the town atheist. And the town atheist is giving him argument after argument after argument for why he does not believe in God. And Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Berditchev is listening very thoughtfully to his arguments. And he responds, he says, you know, the God that you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. So often people have misconceptions, misunderstandings about the nature of the Jewish approach to God. Step number one is we have to deconstruct all your assumptions about God. And we're going to express this point in a fabulous little video here.
So, you want to know more about God? Let's start with your current conception of God. Is he a big mighty guy in the sky, tugging at the puppet strings of the universe? Does he spend his days golfing with the righteous on lush heaven greens? Is he angry and vengeful, or wise and kind? We all have conceptions of God, picked up along our developing years. But before we delve into secrets of God's being, we need to do some inner household cleaning. You see, thousands of years ago, young Abraham had a similar problem. At the time, people were searching for coherence in a universe that seemed random. So they devised an elaborate system of multiple powers, who each were responsible for a different function. If you got the rain god happy, you got more rain. If the sun god was pleased, you got more sun for your crops. Then the wise men decided that each god was associated with a figure and shape, an idol that you could conveniently buy from your local idol shop. And these figurines had the power to grant or deny your deepest needs and wishes. Abraham's father Terah had just such a shop, and he made the mistake of asking Abraham to man the sales floor for a day. An old woman walked in. "Young man, an idol, please, for my arthritis. Which of these gods is good for my knees?" "How old are you?" Abraham asked. 60, replied the woman. "You poor thing," Abraham said. 60 years old and bowing down to an object that was made yesterday. Embarrassed, the woman slinked away. Next, a woman came in with a plate filled with fine flour. "Take this, young man, and offer it to the idols." But Abraham had a different idea. He took a club and smashed all the idols. He then put the club in the hand of the largest idol. When Terah came to the store, he was furious. "What have you done to the idols?" "I must be honest with you," Abraham responded. "A woman came with a plate of fine flour and asked me to offer it to them. When I set it before them, one of the idols exclaimed, 'I'm starving. I will eat first.' Another quickly protested, 'No, I will eat first.' That started a huge fight. What a scene! The largest idol then stood up, grabbed that club, and smashed the rest of them. "Are you mocking me?" Terah shouted. "Do the idols have any awareness?" Abraham smiled. "Exactly." Abraham went on to teach people what God is not. Before humanity could begin to know what God is, they had to unlearn their crooked conception of him. We are not so different from school or from home or from Hollywood. We ingest portraits of God that stay stuck in stone, not growing with us as we mature and our intelligence blossoms. If and when we decide we want to expand our understanding of God, we must first do what Abraham did. We have to unlearn before we learn. Before constructing God, we need to deconstruct.
So often people have a difficult time approaching religion, approaching Judaism, Torah and mitzvahs, because they have a preconceived notion of who, what, and how God operates. What is step number one? Before we can know God, we need to first unknow the God of our current perception. So what is principle number one that we want to get across tonight? Principle number one is we cannot understand God. Now, you may be thinking just, wait a minute. I just signed up for a 6-week course where the title and the very theme is understanding, knowing God. So I will explain. We know a lot about God, but God himself, right, his very essence is, for all intents and purposes, unknowable. And this is actually captured in one of the most common expressions that we use to refer to God, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Have you heard this expression before? Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one of the most common expressions within Jewish literature, rabbinic literature, to refer to God. What does this mean? Let's go to text number 5, the Maharal of Prague, on page 9. Well, technically on page 10 with the English. Betty, would you like to read? No, there's no pressure for anyone to read. You could pass if you want, but if you'd like, go for it, Betty, please. The top of page 10.
Our sages purposefully refer to God as Kadosh, Kadosh, the Holy One, because God's truest self is unknowable, detached from and beyond every form of physicality, body, or any other existing entity. It is therefore appropriate to refer to God as the Holy One, for the term Kadosh is used for an entity that is removed. Our sages, in their great wisdom, informed us of this truth through referring to God as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, implying that God's simple and transcendence all that exists. They intentionally chose a negative term to refer to God, which does not identify what he is, but rather denotes that he transcends all that exists.
So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which translates to the Holy One, blessed be He, again, very popular name that we refer to as God in rabbinic literature. What does it actually mean to convey? That God is detached from every form of physicality. It's essentially a statement saying, who is God? That which is unknown, that which can't be known. What do we mean by that? There's a great parable brought in philosophy. I can't remember who or where it comes from, but imagine you have these blind gentlemen, and they have an opportunity to experience an elephant for the first time. Never saw an elephant before. They are blind, right? They don't know what it looks like. So the elephant is brought in, and one of the blind men goes up to the elephant and he grabs the tail, and he's feeling the tail. Oh, this is kind of like a snake, right? This animal is a snake-like type of animal. Another of the blind people grabs the tusk, and he says, wow, this is like smooth like a rock, right? Maybe it's like the shell of a turtle. Maybe that's what this type of animal is like. Another one of the people, blind men, grabs the leg. Wow, this is a huge, gigantic leg. This is an animal that is like a tree trunk. Do any of these people have any clue about what actually an elephant is? No. They can attempt to learn things about the elephant. It has this feature or another feature, but of course, they're not able to tell exactly what the elephant is. In a similar sense, we can know and learn many things about God, how God expresses himself, how God reveals himself to us, what God wants us to know about him. But to know the essence of God, God is beyond time and space. God is the one who created time and space. It's impossible to know God's essence because God is a different type, a different style of creation. We don't have the tools to measure that. Can you weigh a thought? Impossible to weigh a thought, right? We simply don't have the tools. Now, one of the stumbling blocks that we often place in front of ourselves when trying to understand God is the idea that God created man in his image. However, how do we occasionally interpret it? We return the favor and create God in our image, right? We have to recognize our blindness in this area. We cannot create God in our image. We have to remember that we are created in the image of God. This phenomenon that we attempt to create God in our own image, Rabbi Steinsaltz explains an interesting phenomenon that we have in Jewish history. Throughout the Tanakh, throughout the biblical text, Jews are obsessed with idols. We have the famous story of the golden calf. Literally, as the Torah is being given to the Jewish people, after they were led out of Egypt, after God split the Red Sea, they're running after idols. Multiple times, when the Jews were in the desert, they had issues with idols. They go into the land of Israel, idols. One generation after King David, King Solomon, right, his son, the entire country is torn apart. It is separated, is divided in two. Idol worship is rampant amongst the Jewish people. Why was the first temple destroyed? Because of idol worship. The ultimate reason for and behind our obsession with idol worship is this very idea of our desire to create God in our own image. Let's go to text number 6a. Dave, would you like to read text number 6a?
One of the special things about the Jews is a certain mental quality that undoubtedly exists in other nations, but is more predominant among us. And this is the inclination toward idolatry. It is not easy to define idolatry because this term applies to a broad range of things. In the more general sense, idolatry is not specifically the presence of real and concrete statues, or as the multiplicity of gods, but the creation of what the Bible calls other gods. That is, the turning of some entity, as it were, into a supreme goal, into a god. This is the more abstract and superior aspect of idolatry. But this, like the material cult of idols, is in complete contradiction to the essential faith in one God.
So Rabbi Steinsaltz explains that Jews are especially susceptible to idolatry because of their desire for spiritual experiences. There's something within the Jew that is pulling them, tugging them to want meaning, purpose, something a little bit higher, something that transcends the everyday existence. But it's a challenge. And what often ends up happening is we create God in our own image. And is this desire that results in almost 50% of all cult leaders and cult members have been Jews. So many of the founders and originators of new and interesting religions, Jews. You heard the expression Jew booze, right? You never heard right? A Jewish Buddhist, right? A Jewish Buddhist, right? There are so many leaders within the Buddhist religion, people who are Jewish. Leaders within the atheist movement, right? Which is looking for a different type of religion. So many of the most prominent members are Jewish. So many of the teachers, professors, activists, revolutionaries of various isms throughout history have all been Jews. Now, if Jews are so passionate about living a life of spirituality with meaning and their soul is always shaking, why don't they turn to their own belief system? Why aren't these people connecting with the religion of their parents and their grandparents? Why are they looking towards something new? Let's go to text number 6b. Rabbi Steinsaltz. Mitchell, would you like to go for text number 6b?
Belief in God includes from the start, beginning with the Ten Commandments, two components that everyone finds difficult to grasp to identify with. First is the perception of God as the one and only, who is therefore all embracing and all supreme, divine above all comprehension, and therefore far above any personal relationship. There is something defined and specific. To this is compounded another difficulty, which is the faith that is entirely an abstraction, which does not allow any form or other experience that can be grasped. Idolatry, in all its forms, destroys that unity and replaces it with entities, whether a few or many, that can all be defined and grasped. Idolatry is an attempt of simple people to give some kind of form of divine being, with which they could then develop a closer and more concrete type of relationship. The temptation to identify with and observe something that can be understood, recognized, and to some extent felt at extent very great.
Judaism has a problem. The God in Judaism has no image. There is no picture. There is no physical representation. There's nothing concrete that a person can grasp onto. In just about every other religion out there, there is a form, an image, there's a representation of God that you can concretize. There's a very popular religion out there in the world, right, that believes very strongly in the Son of God coming to this world. Because God is too abstract to relate to, therefore God appears in a human form that is very handsome and makes for fabulous paintings as well. So for Jews, there is a difficulty to relate to a God who is an abstraction. And therefore, Jews are occasionally drawn to and look towards places that do have various concrete images and representations that they feel they can sink their teeth into a little bit better. Rabbi Steinsaltz writes that idolatry is an attempt of simple people to give a form to the divine image, leading to a more concrete type of relationship. So to answer question number 1, what is God? The answer to that is very simple. We don't know. We don't know. We can only understand things about him. And throughout this course, we are going to do the best that we can to understand things about him. But to understand the essence of who God is, we're going to demonstrate further in the class as well, not understandable for a human being. So what can we know about God? Well, we can try to figure out where he is. Where is God? For this, you're going to need a pen, and you have a choice of writing in your book or writing on a piece of paper. It's up to you. I have paper here, and I have pens here. Anyone need a pen? Okay. But this is drawing here. You want a pen? You could draw right in your book. You got one? Pages of paper, okay? You got a pen? You have a pen? There you go, you got a pen. You got a pen, you could want to draw in your book. You could draw on your book. You want paper or your book?
Paper and a pen.
Paper and a pen. Okay. There you go. Paper and a pen.
I'll just take
Paper.
that. Drawing. Can't draw.
We are going to make a drawing over here, okay? So if you have your book open, you can see on page 13, it says in the box below or on a separate piece of paper, draw a representation of this world, then add a representation for God by writing God. That's a very easy way to do it, or using some other symbol. So this is not the type of drawing that will one day be put in a museum and then tomato soup will be thrown at it. It's just a simple representation. Draw on this box the world. Then draw whatever your representation of that is. Okay? Earth, a globe, whatever it is that you want. And then draw God's relationship to it, God's placement in it. And again, whatever symbol you want to use, or just simply writing the word God, give you 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it is an important exercise. All right, 5 more seconds or so. Glad I don't have a buzzer. It would make it a lot more dramatic. But if you feel you have to do it a little more, not a problem. All right, we will get back to your drawing in a moment. If you want to look into the Torah for a placement of where God is, there are 2 locations. right? There are two depictions of God's location throughout the Torah. Number one is in the heavens, right? God is described as being in the heavens. We refer to God as our Father in heaven, Avinu Shebashamayim. If you want to refer to a person who has real awe of God, fear of God, the Hebrew term is Yirei Shamayim, a person who's in awe, who's in fear of heaven. In Yiddish, if you want to talk about God, you say Eibishter, right? Eibishter means the one who is above. Hold on a second. Okay. There's still one technical glitch that I have not been able to work out. Let's see if I can do it right now or not. There we go. Fixed it. Okay. Very good. Arlene has joined us. How are you, Arlene? Excellent. So in Yiddish, one of the most common expressions for God is the Eibishter. What is the Eibishter? Is the one who's above. Often when people are praying, they will look towards the heaven, right? They'll lift up their eyes. There are actually places in the Siddur where it says, lift up your eyes and lift up your hands to heaven. So if we want a location where God is located, the Torah definitely points us to heaven. However, there are numerous other verses that point to the fact that God is everywhere. God fills all places. So which is it? What is the answer? Where is God? Now, there's actually a problem with each of these answers. Whether you want to place God in the heavens or you want to place God everywhere. If you place God in the heavens, you are limiting God. This completely contradicts our belief that God is omnipresent. God being omnipresent literally means God is not restricted to any particular type of location. At the same time, if we want to say that God is everywhere, this is also placing a limitation because we are confining, we're limiting God to being in a specific created area and location, even if you want to turn that everywhere. So we have a problem. Either of these places is going to restrict God. Yet, we know that one of the actual names of God is Hamakom. One of the names that we refer to as God is space. One of the most common places where we use this is the text for comforting a mourner. We refer to God as Hamakom Yinachem Eschem. Right? We say, may the omnipresent, may the Almighty comfort you. But if you literally translate it, you're saying, may the place comfort you. We just stated that God does not have a place. God does not have a location. We can't limit God to the heavens. We can't limit God to everywhere. So what do we mean when we refer to God as the space? Text number 9, a beautiful medrash. Sandy, are you up for reading text number 9? Page 14. The bottom of page 14, text number 9.
Okay, that is the space of the universe. The universe is not the space of God.
What do you think that means? Right? It's a little cryptic of a sense. It's one of those things you read it the first time, needs some thought, it needs some reflection. God is the space of the universe, but the universe is not the space of God. We need to think a little bit about what is the nature of space. The space is where we are. The space is holding us up. The space is containing us to a certain degree. When we refer to God as space, what does that mean? God is that which is holding us up. God is what contains us. So when we refer to God as space, God holds the world and enables it to exist. The world is not the space of God, because the world does not hold and contain God. That would be limiting God. It's exactly the opposite. God is the space of the world. That means that God is the one who holds up and contains the space of the world. Therefore, when we ask this question, where is God? The answer is not God is everywhere? The answer is everywhere is in God. Right? Just you flip it around a little bit, and that is a totally different meaning. We're not placing God somewhere. We're recognizing that everywhere is essentially the space of God, because God is that which contains and holds and sustains everything. Now, if that is the case, why do we refer to God as being in heaven? And why do we refer to God as being everywhere? If that's not accurate, if accurate is to say everywhere is in God, so why do we say that God's in heaven? Well, the answer is that there are two ways that we relate to and perceive God. So in addition to the fact that God is not everywhere, but everywhere is God, we also want to recognize that God is in the heavens. When we refer to the fact that God in the heavens, what do we mean? We mean that God is not concrete. God is not tangible. God is beyond us. He transcends us, right? God is in the heavens. So when we say that God is in the heavens, we don't mean a physical location. It's a reflection on the nature of God, that God is a transcendent, heavenly, out of this world type of being. Similarly, when we say that God is everywhere, what are we trying to reflect? We're trying to make an attempt to see the world as an expression of God, that God can be felt in this world. God can be perceived in this world. There's something called divine providence. God runs the show. We use this name to refer to God when we're comforting a mourner, because we're trying to say, who is the one that is comforting you when you're in pain? It's not an invisible, transcendent God that we have no conception of. That's not very comforting. That's not comforting. When we say that God comforts you, it's a concrete, tangible God that is expressed in this world and that we can feel. Therefore, when we comfort the mourner, we don't want the mourner to reflect on an invisible, transcendent God. We want the mourner to reflect on the fact that God is present. He's here in your life. God occupies the space of your life. And from that space, he's able to provide that comfort. Let's go back to that drawing that you made. We made a drawing of the world, and you made a drawing of God. Where did you place God in your drawing of the world? Did you place God in the heavens above the world? Or did you place God within that world that you drew?
I placed them all around.
All right, we have an everywhere. Sandy, is that an everywhere as well? Anyone else want to share what they drew? Inside and above? What do we got here? Okay. All right, now that's frame worthy. All right, that's very good. However, everyone is wrong. In this demonstration, a more accurate presentation would be, God is not in the heavens. God is not in the earth of your drawing. God is the paper, right? God is the paper, right? Everywhere is God. He is that which sustains and contains all of existence, not in the heavens, not in the earth, but is the paper that contains and surrounds it all. So where is God? This is principle number 2. God is the space that encompasses all of existence. Now, there's a beautiful story from the Rebbe, the Kotzker Rebbe. Someone asked him, where is God? And his response was, wherever you let him in. Right? God can appear transcendent. God can appear very personal, right? Because of the fact that God is the space that encompasses all of existence, that means in every activity, any behavior that we do, it's an opportunity to experience God. There's no activity that is too earthly not to contain the presence of God. There's no activity that can be outside of the presence of God. Where is God found? Wherever you let him in. Right? Wherever you want to connect with God in a powerful, spiritual, meaningful way, that opportunity is always available and there for you. So principle number 2, where is God? God is the space that encompasses all of existence. Any questions before we move on to the question number 3? All right. Question number 3. How did God come to be? Now, this is yes.
Bad, like he's in every space, so he's in bad places too.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. There was a debate amongst Jewish philosophers as whether God is present in the bathroom. Is God present in the bathroom? And there is a philosophical argument that could be made to say that no, God is not present in the bathroom. He created the bathroom, but he exists outside of that bathroom. He sustains it, but that's not where he's found. However, I think the conclusion, and certainly the way Chabad Hasidic philosophy views it, that absolutely, there is nothing that is too mundane or too earthly for God, because that would be limiting, defining, and excluding, and it's impossible to do so. Because God is not everywhere. Everywhere is God. That means there isn't a place that can be outside of or devoid or separate from God. Even the most physical, material, and even the most unpleasant.
When an Israeli soldier gets killed, God is right there in that space.
100%. Now, this is not the topic of tonight's class, right? But we'll get to the edges of that question. But I just want to briefly make one point. Rabbi Akiva, right, one of the greatest sages of the Talmud, he was murdered by the Romans. And the Talmud describes, right, how he was murdered. That they took hot metal combs, we read it on Yom Kippur in the service, and were scraping, peeling the flesh off his body. And it came time to say Shema, right? And he said Shema with a smile. And the students were blown away. They could not comprehend it. And essentially what Rabbi Akiva responded was that at this point in time, he did not see the face of the executioner. He saw the face of God. What does that mean? How do we interpret it? Perhaps we'll address it at another point in time. But yes, God is present in every circumstance, every situation, no matter how unpleasant on the surface. God can be found even there. And later lessons will address how we can perceive God in those locations. All right, question number 3. How did God come to be? Now, this is, again, a very reasonable question. Because when you meet someone and you want to get to know them, what do you say? Where did you grow up? Right? Where did you come from? Right? How did you find yourself here? So therefore, it makes perfect sense that if we are meant to be in a relationship with God, we are meant to connect with God. Where did you come from? Who created you? Right? This is a perfectly reasonable question. And the driving factor really behind this question is that at the very core of understanding that there is a God is this notion that if the world is here, something has to have created it. So one of the basic arguments for God is the world. There is a universe that exists. We're in it right now. But wait a minute. Where did it come from? We live in a world where everything has to have a source. If there is an effect, that effect had to have a cause. Where did it come from? It came from the Creator. This is one of the logical proofs for the existence of God. How do you know God exists? Because we're here. Everything has to have been created. But this, of course, leads to the next question, which the next question is, where did the Creator come from? So Stephen Hawking, in one of his books, he describes a scene, I don't know if it's a true story, if he's just making it up, where a profound physicist, maybe himself, was giving a lecture, and after the lecture, a woman came over to him and said, baloney, garbage, everything you said makes no sense. We all know the world is flat, absolutely flat, and it rests on the back of a turtle, right? And Stephen Hawking says, oh, really? Does it rest on the back of a turtle? Well, what is holding up the turtle, right? And the woman says, what do you think, I'm stupid? There's a bigger turtle underneath that turtle that holds up the turtle on the top. So Stephen Hawking says, well, Who holds up the turtle that's underneath? And the woman says, you think you're so smart? You thought of everything? It's turtles all the way down. So this has actually become an expression, right? Turtles all the way down, right? Who created the creator? And it's a fabulous question. And what makes it such a fabulous question is it's literally part of the proof for the fact that we know that God exists. So the logical problem is that every effect has a cause. What does Judaism have to say about this issue? We advance by realizing that the creator isn't an effect at all, and so he requires no cause at all. Our frame of reference is limited to time and space. Everything within time and space has cause and effect, before and after. One thing is the result of something else. However, God is not subject to time and space. God is the creator of time and space. Therefore, God is not the effect of something that would require something to cause God's existence. I'm going to ask some questions, and I want everyone here to shoot it out. Right, Mitchell, shoot it out as fast as you can. Don't raise your hand. Don't wait for anyone, okay? You ready? Rapid fire, quick, as fast as you can. Who invented the iPhone? Steve Jobs. Who invented the light bulb? Who invented the airplane? Who invented 2 + 2 is 4? Mitchell had one of the greatest teachers ever. The iPhone needed to be invented, had to be invented. It did not previously exist. It had to be invented. A light bulb was something that you had to invent. Similarly, planes are something you had to invent. But 2 + 2 is 4 is not something that you have to invent. 2 + 2 = 4 is something that just is. Similarly, God is something that just is, right? He cannot be created. He can only be discovered. Let's go to chart 1.3. This is on page 16, right? Page 16. This is how the Rambam formulates this idea in his book, The Guide for the Perplexed. So he writes that everything, right, is in Hebrew it's called the Metzius, which means an entity that exists, right? Stuff that's in the world, it's stuff that exists. Me, you, the chair, the table, we're stuff that exists. What about God? God is an existence unlike any other form of existence. So we have to recognize there's existence. That existence is governed by rules and regulations. And then there's God. God is a completely different type of existence. Does not have the same rules, the same regulations. Totally different. Point number 2, the Rambam writes here, the left column, that everything is contingent existence. That means it does not have to exist, and it's dependent on something else for its existence. However, God is a very different type of existence. God is a necessary existence. It exists absolutely. And in the next line, he clarifies even more that everything that's in existence is a dependent existence. For it to exist, it is dependent on something else for its existence. However, God is an independent existence. God is not something that relies on anything else for its existence. God is a necessary existence, an existence that must be, and therefore has no cause. You remember at the beginning of the class, we asked the question, what is God? And the answer was, we can't know. Because an entity and a being that can actually create time and space, that means God is an existence that is outside of time and space. It's not fathomable. The human mind cannot fathom such a thing, right? You can't even imagine such a thing. It is a being, right, that is a necessary existence. It's not dependent on anything else. Now, this idea is so beautifully expressed in the very first encounter between Moshe and God at the burning bush. Moshe says to God, you expect me to go to the Jewish people and they're going to believe in you? Who should I tell them called? You got a message? Who should I tell called? Was God looking for a name? It's Bob. Tell them it's Bob. That does not give you any information. What Moshe was looking for, a name that conveys and expresses who and what God is. Therefore, the people should say, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I want to have something to do with that. So let's go to text number 10a. Freddie, would you like to read 10a?
Moses said to God, when I come to the children of Israel and inform them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, they will respond, what is his name? What should I tell them?
And continue to text number 10b, which is Moshe, God's response.
God replied to Moses, Eliyahu Asher Eliyahu.
Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, right? It's a hard word. What does that mean? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. That is what God responds. What's my name? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. What does that mean? It means, now, first of all, what do you think God would say? God would say, you tell them, I am the creator of the world, right? That would be a good one, right? Tell the Jewish people, who's the one who's talking to you? Who's the one who's communicating to you? Creator of the world. It's not what he says. You might think he'll say, tell him the all-powerful, right? The almighty, the all-merciful, any of the type of names that we have for God, but that's not what he says. He says, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. The word Ehyeh, the root of the word is Haya. Haya means existence. So what did God say? Tell the Jewish people, who is the God that you're dealing with over here? Not a God who has a particular talent, skill, ability, character. All those Egyptian gods have all this stuff too. Who am I? I am the existing being that is the existent being. I am the essence of existence. I am the only thing that is actually real, because God is not dependent on something else for its existence. Just like 2 + 2 is 4, it is truth, it is reality. So too, God is truth, God is reality, God is existence. And that's what God is communicating to Moshe, that you relate to the Jewish people. Who is this God? Not just a particular skill or talent, but the absolute essence of all existence. The existent being that is the existent being. Go to text number 11. On page 18, we are back to Jim, please.
This phrase conveys that God's existence is not an ordinary existence. We could summarize the concept as such: God is the existence that exists. In other words, he is essential and absolute rather than contingent his existence.
So God's most outstanding quality is that he exists. Might sound a little funny, it might sound a little strange, but another way of saying it is God is absolute existence as opposed to who we are. So that if we come to the question of how did God come to be, I hope that based on everything that we've studied so far, you'll recognize that insisting on looking for God's cause means we're stuck in our own box of creating God in our own image. When we ask the question, well, who created God? We're looking from a perspective of creating a God in our own image. We have to recognize God transcends time, space, and everything. Therefore, that's not a question that we can ask. What is God? God is existence, that which absolutely necessarily has to exist. There's a great story about the town of Chelm. Are you familiar with the town of Chelm? Right. Chelm is the village in Jewish folklore of everyone, I guess, is the village idiot. Right? Every resident who lives there. So the story goes is that they are building a train track through Chelm. And people hear about it for the first time ever. A train is going to pass through. It is a horseless cart. They can't believe it. They can't imagine it. They're so excited, they're thrilled. The train comes through town and the place is packed. And the people from Chelm are exploring it everywhere. They're looking underneath it. They're looking on the top. They're looking on the side. They're looking on the back. And the conductor comes over and says, "What on earth are you looking for?" And the conductor says, "There's got to be some tiny horse in here somewhere." Right? Because what is the framework of the people of Chelm? Their only framework is got to be a horse. There's no other way to get a car to move than other than a horse. I don't see the horse. It's tiny. It's small. You hit it. It's above. It's below. It's got to be somewhere. The same thing. How did God come to be? Right? We got to get out of that framework of creating God in our own image. All things but God are contingent existences. God is a necessary existence. Now, if you'd like, after the class, I could send you a work of philosophy where this issue is discussed for many, many pages and is quite a profound, deep argument. I can send you that afterwards. Question number 4. Is God a he, a she, or a they? After everything we've learned so far, this shouldn't be a question. Because after everything we've learned so far, what gender would God be? Genderless. We cannot limit God to a particular gender. Yet, any person who has been to shul and opened up a siddur will notice that God is referred to with all kinds of male titles. Avinu Malkeinu, one of the most famous songs, part of our liturgy, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, other times in the year, our Father, our King. Our Father and our King are very much male terminology. So if God is genderless, why then is God described almost exclusively in male terms? One simple answer is that in Hebrew, all nouns are ascribed to gender. It's not like English. English is a genderless language when it comes to nouns. But in Hebrew, everything you say, every word, is either male or female. It's in the masculine or secular or feminine tense. For example, in order to say it, which would appear to be the most genderless statement, can't do that in Hebrew. In Hebrew, you're either saying ze or zos, right? Ze is masculine, zos is feminine. So in Hebrew, there's simply no other way to speak. There isn't a genderless way to speak. You have to be using a gender. But if you have to be using a gender, why is it male? Why is it our Father, our King? Why don't we say our Mother, our Queen? Right? If God is genderless, but we have to use a gender in language, our Mother, our Queen, why not use that particular expression? The answer is that when we are using the names of God, right, we're using the names of God to refer to how he interacts with the world. What do male and female represent? Right? Without painting the picture, right, too bluntly, right? In biology, the male is the giver. The female is the one who receives. That means there are two different behaviors. There are two different ways that a person can act in life, right? There's a male expression. There's a female expression. The male is the giver, the provider, the builder, right? The woman is the one who receives and then transforms, right? And grows and develops that which the person is given. So from a Hebrew Torah perspective, when we say male, we mean someone who's acting as a giver, provider, doer, and so on. When we talk about someone who's acting female, we're talking about someone who receives, and then from that which they receive are able to take that and develop it in a whole nother fashion. When we refer to God in masculine terms, right, we speak of and to him as the giver, right, the creator, the Father, the King, the one who rules, the one who judges, the one who provides. However, there are many times we refer to God in the feminine as well, right? The word Shechina, right? This is God in the feminine sense. We talk about the Shabbos queen, right? Shabbos has feminine spiritual energy. So it's not that God is gendered and God is male. God is genderless, of course. When we refer to God in any specific gender, it's how God is relating to us and how God is expressing himself to us at that time. Is God behaving and acting in the male fashion, right? The giver, the provider, the creator, or in the feminine fashion? When God is acting in the male fashion, who is the female? Us, the Jewish people, right? We are in that relationship to God. God is the male, we're the female. God gives, he provides to us. We receive, and then our job is to ultimately transform that which God gave us and make the world a better place. So is God a he, a she, or a they? The answer is God is neither male nor female, but God manifests in both male and female modalities. It all depends on how God is interacting with the world at that moment and at that time. Any comments and questions before we recap what we studied tonight?
Lesson 1. The Basics. 1. Asking questions about God is not a sign of weakness in belief. Even the ardent believer must do so in an attempt to gain deeper understandings of God. It is important that our relationship with God encompasses our totality, and that our minds should understand what our souls naturally feel. 2. Many of our conceptions of God are incorrect and even childish. Like Abraham long ago, we need to first unknow the God of our current perception before we can gain an accurate understanding of the divine. 3. Although we can know much about God, he himself is unknowable. The essence of idolatry is the attempt to concretize God and fit him within a familiar framework to create a God in our own image. 4. In Jewish sources, we find depictions of God being located above in the heavens, and we are also told that God is everywhere. While these are both true from a certain perspective, there's a deeper reality. God contains the world, holding all its existence in his space. Everywhere is within God. 5. God's existence is radically different from the existence of all else. All things but God are contingent existences, brought into being by a cause, and by definition they need not exist. God is a necessary existence, an existence that must be, and therefore has no cause. 6. On an essential level, God transcends gender and is non-binary. Yet God manifests himself in both male and female modalities. When we refer to God in masculine terms, we refer to God as he manifests or behaves in a masculine manner, i.e., as our provider and husband. Doing so places emphasis on our importance to God and our relationship with him.
Next week, same time and place, we're going to look at his nature. So does God have feelings? Does he communicate with us? Does he ever act illogically? Why does he have so many names? And why is it that many write God with a hyphen? So those are some of the questions that we're going to look at next week. In the meantime, there are two incredible resources. Number one, myjli.com/mygod. On this website, you will have many lectures, articles, audio classes, video classes that expand on the topics that we're discussing tonight. So it's an incredible resource. But even more importantly, the book that you have in your hand, if you turn to page 26, after each lesson, there's a wealth of information. So on page 26, it says proof for God's existence, philosophical arguments for God's existence. The next page, we have the strength of tradition. The next page, masculine and feminine within Judaism and how that's expressed in so many different places. And then we have God as described in Jewish liturgy. So we have prayers here and with various commentary on some of the most famous prayers, and we see how God is described in the liturgy. So I highly recommend you really look through this. It's not just a textbook for the class. There's a wealth of information to take home and to follow. Then, of course, every Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. in the Shul Zoom room, 30 minutes of Torah study. So thank you so much for joining us for lesson number 1.